Good evening and welcome to the Chancellor's Present show. We're just delighted to have you back here again, and I'm very, very pleased to be able to introduce our special guest, Matt Rinka. Matt is a wonderful alum of UWM College of Architecture and Arts, and when he was there, it was our School of Architecture and Urban Planning. And it's so wonderful to have so many of you here with us tonight. This is one of the biggest crowds we've ever had for a Chancellor Present show, and I'm not surprised about that at all. Matt, good evening. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. This is really special. There's a lot of people who've turned out. They really want to learn more about you. They want to learn more about what your firm has done, and really a lot about the whole process and the concepts around architecture, build, design, and really at a deeper level also just what it means for the city and what your profession does and how it operates, and ultimately some of the issues that we'll talk about are just, I think, gonna be wide-ranging, far and deep. Are you okay with that?
I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored that so many people are interested in what myself and the firm has done.
Great. Well, I think a lot of it has to do with what you've accomplished, and you have received 85 different architectural awards, nationally award-winning, and a number of different areas. As I've said before, there's very few people in any city who can be seen as really impacting the skyline of a particular city. Sometimes you have a particularly prominent building in a city that's known for this architect or for this style, but you really have changed the scale and design and really the forward-looking aspects of Milwaukee in many ways. Several of those projects, just to name a few, include the Moderne, the Couture, which is now being built. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure. Some of our audience is interested in knowing. The Bucks Entertainment District, a lot of the different projects around there, and the Michaels building on the south side, all of which are significant and really do impact the skyline. And there's many, many other projects along the way. I think folks are also interested because your firm has achieved such prominence, not just here in Milwaukee, but you've had impact in not just throughout Midwestern cities, but today in Fort Lauderdale, in Tempe, Arizona, numerous major projects, and the word is out.
I'm glad for that, by the way.
And UWM has played a significant role, so I look
Yes.
forward to talking with you further about that. But audience, back to you for a moment. These are just some of the reasons why I think you've joined us tonight, and there's more as well. So I'm going to refer to a few notes and just talk a little bit more, and then we're going to get into many of your questions and a few questions that we've drummed up on our own. So I'm really excited, if you can't tell, about this opportunity to be able to have this conversation with you, Matt. So Matt is not only a gifted architect, but he really gives back in a lot of different ways. He serves on several boards, including the Frederick Hospital Board. He's on the MIAD, that's the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, for those of you not here in Milwaukee. And by the way, if you're not here in Milwaukee, if you happen to be somewhere else, you're going to miss a lot of great snow that we have coming our way, 6 to 10 inches, we think, tomorrow. So enjoy that if you're not here. MIAD, Frederick Hospital Board, UWM Foundation Board. He serves as the vice chair of that, and we're so grateful, Matt, for your service and giving back. I also want you to know that Matt has established the largest scholarship account in our School of Architecture and Urban Planning, and we're so grateful for that. You've been doing that for 5 years, and you've re-upped a commitment to do it for another 5, and I suspect we'll talk also a little bit about promulgating, continuing that talent pipeline that is so important in your field. That will also be receiving this year our 2023 Distinguished Alumni Award, which is something that we give one of, and it is certainly very well deserved, Matt, to you.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored for that.
Great. Okay. Well, let's take a look at some of these questions. And as I mentioned earlier, most of these questions come from you, and that's always a delightful part, to be able to really align what we're doing with your interests. So, first question, just to set the stage. How did you become, and why did you want to become an architect?
Bit of a loaded question, but I was adopted at a young age, at 5 years old, and by 2 very highly educated school teachers, and grew up who had hired an architect right out of school to design a home just north of Oconomowoc. It was a solar home built into the hillside, tri-level house. The entire house was heated by one fireplace, and the site orientation allowed that house to be, I think they had a electrical heating system that they may have turned on once in the entire time that I grew up there. So very, very sort of ingenious in terms of its design. It was naturally cooled because it was built into the hillside, and the sun orientations and the eaves, as well as the convection system, and that's the way the air moves through the house to naturally cool the residence. I recall when I was younger that there'd be UWM as well as MSOE students who would come to the house. They would take measurements and sort of study the energy use of the house. And so I would say understanding the impact that design could have on how we go about our typical day really piqued my interest in becoming an architect. Of course, I enjoyed Legos and building models and all that, but that evolved into designing what I was going to build. So designing my own models, and as I got older, wanting to design sort of everything that I saw. And in a sense, I just wanted to design a better world.
Wow.
And so that's, and I'll just say that I'm not necessarily that enamored, and I never have been, about becoming an architect. It was sort of a means to an end.
Okay.
Being an architect really allows myself as well as our team to impact a lot of communities and a lot of lives, and that's what I get passion and joy out of.
You're very selfless, you're very humble, you give a lot of credit to your team. Can you talk a little bit about your team?
I'll say they're the best in the business.
There we go.
They're amazing, and we have team members from all over the country. At the same time, I think we have about 75 or 80% of our team graduated from UWM. So
love to hear
we have
that.
a huge connection
Yeah.
to the school, which is why it's so important for us to give back, as well as for myself to serve on the board. So
well, we appreciate that. Our foundation is very important to our campus, and it's so nice to have your service and for you to employ our graduates. I know that you mentor, you hire, you have internships. I mentioned earlier the scholarship support. Tell me a little bit more about why that seems to work so well for you.
Well, I think for us it's providing opportunities for individuals. We want an open door, and so we want to provide students opportunities to come check us out, work for us for a summer, or work in the office for even an externship during the semester. So, but in any case, we feel like that sort of constant connection back to the school and back to our roots is important, not just for the students, but for the firm to continue to grow and attract some of the best talent.
That's neat. So we know, and I talked earlier about a little bit of the impact on the skyline in Milwaukee. You can talk a little bit about some of the other projects in other cities and some of the things
Sure.
that you're seeing there.
Yeah, we're really excited about some of the efforts that were underway in South Florida. So we've got several major projects on the boards. We just completed a major marina project in Fort Lauderdale about a year ago. We're under construction on actually one of the biggest projects in our office, which is a project called the Pier in Tempe, Arizona. It's 2 25-story towers. You can see the renderings on our website. You can actually see some of the construction photos as well. But I would say our approach to solving complex design problems and utilizing sites in not just creative ways, but ways that many landowners and communities are sort of surprised by, to help sort of stitch those sites to the larger community, is something that just we're passionate about, and it's something that travels really well, not just for the work that we do within our own backyard, but really nationally.
So it's interesting, going back to your origins as an architect and kind of the environment you were raised in, how using the land and being built into the land helps you today as you solve problems given existing footprints and landscapes. So the couture, I know a number of our listeners would probably be very interested and want to know more about. There have to be some challenges with that space, and what did that present as some of the challenges, and what are some of the key solutions that you've come up with in terms of that building?
Sure, every site has its own challenges, but I think the demands on that site were extremely unique. It wasn't just about creating a tall building, it was about creating a hub for all forms of transportation. So whether you're coming by car or by the streetcar or by foot or bicycle, or by bus, it needed to accommodate and become really a hub for and center point or jumping off point for visitors and residents and alike to be able to enjoy our lakefront. So it was extremely important for us to make sure that the building sort of served all of those functions, and at the same time captured the eye. And so the connection of bridges and pedestrian walkways, as well as the integration of the streetcar and the bus rapid transit system, not just on the peripheral of the building, but through the heart of the site and through the heart of the building, was critical in making this a true transit-oriented development. And that's, I think, really maybe the first of its kind in the state, certainly in Milwaukee, but it's something that as hopefully we get a little more detached from our reliance on cars and more reliant on the mass transit system, this is going to be a project that will serve as an example for how to integrate that into the project versus on the peripheries.
So that's a lot about the function, a lot about the use of land and space.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit, we know it's going to be, based on our earlier conversation, the tallest residential building in the state. Help me with the aesthetics. We've talked about the skyline before, how you see Milwaukee from the east looking west, but just in general, help me with, not having seen the finished product and things. What will we see? How will this compare to some of the other projects that are around us?
I think the design of the building was to evoke sort of a sleekness, and people say, well, it doesn't feel like Milwaukee, and I've always said, well, that's a great compliment, because this building is about the future. It's about what Milwaukee is becoming. And I think to view cities as sort of stuck in the past is not giving the credibility of sort of the evolving cultures, as well as the architecture that needs to evolve to support those cultures and serve the culture that's continuing to move forward. This is a building that really speaks to the future of how Milwaukeeans want to live, how they want to experience the lakefront, how they want to experience the streetcar and the transportation systems, as well as the walkability and the pedestrian nature of the downtown, which certainly has greatly improved in the last 10 to 20 years.
Well, what a visionary you are, and we're so fortunate to have you.
Thank you.
And I'm thinking about the brutalism, architectural style on our campus, and how our new buildings have dramatically changed that as we've really moved into some futuristic types of designs and buildings, whether it's the existing Kenwood Interdisciplinary Research Complex or the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, our forthcoming chemistry building. Can't wait to see what suggestions and work Rinka in the future may have for our redesign of some of our areas on that front. Well, let me get back to some of the questions that we've got here from our audience. I know we could really go a lot of different directions with many of these topics, but one of your next questions, audience, is so your discussion earlier did touch upon sustainability. You talked about your parents' home and how you were raised. How do you address this goal that's so important today around net zero in terms of energy, carbon, water, and waste?
Well, we can't do it as a single company alone, but we rely on the AIA, and our firm has made a commitment to the AIA 2030 initiative, which is to design net zero emission buildings by the year 2030. And so it's about accountability. And if all architecture firms were to commit to that initiative, that's where the big impact can happen. So, but we're firm believers of when it comes to sustainable architecture, we're firm believers that good design is sustainable. And the sort of throwaway culture that we have in our society, buildings are a lot of buildings, unfortunately, are sort of done the same way. And so we've made a commitment to make sure that our buildings are not throwaway buildings. They're quality buildings. They're built to last for as long as the community will take care of them. And they're buildings that people love to see, look at, and love to use. And those are the most sustainable buildings that you can create. And certainly there are little things that we do, by little, it's making sure that our specifications for materials is written in a way to advance more sustainable materials, more locally used materials, but that accountability and the commitment that the firm has made to the 2030 initiative is, I think, a very important step that the American Institute of Architects has initiated.
Neat. Your comments remind me of some of the work that's happening in our College of Engineering and Applied Science today around sustainable concrete, where they're getting double and triple the life dealing with the porosity of concrete, which can be used in buildings in a very different way, plus more flexible work in that way. So there's a lot of things coming together here. Very good. So what happens if a client isn't particularly interested in sustainability, net zero, those types of goals? Does that become a conflict, or do you show the benefits, whether it's financial, functional, and just really the way that environmental demands require that for now or in the future?
Yeah, the way we design and the way we approach sustainability with our clients is sort of ingrained in how we do it. So it's not necessarily sort of beating them over the head with the sustainability, but utilizing local materials, utilizing, if there's a choice between a product A and product B, and we know product B is much more sustainably developed, we're always specifying product B. So it's those little things, but at the same time, I would say we go after, and our clients are generally long-term, long-view clients who are not interested in the throwaway architecture and the throwaway buildings. So they're interested in buildings that will stand the test of time, and be built in a way that I think is as sustainable as they can afford.
So when you talk about affordability, I imagine in the audience's mind, or some folks in the audience may be saying, well, doesn't that product, doesn't that service, doesn't that approach cost more? But is there a long-term, short-term trade-off there in terms of how you look at costs?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complex issue, and we like to look at sort of the entire life cycle of a product, how it's made, where it's made. Some of the most sustainable products, unfortunately, might be coming from Europe. Well, they're sustainable, but just the process of getting those products here can be very unsustainable.
Yeah.
So it may be actually more sustainable to get a local product that might be different. But it's a tricky question, and then I'll be honest, I don't know that anyone's figured it out quite yet. And certainly there are some great buildings and great architecture that's pushing those boundaries, and but I do think it needs, it's not just an architectural problem, it's sort of a societal problem or a societal issue that we all need to be on the same page to figure out.
So you've been doing this for a while. How long have you been doing this?
Well, I got my first job in 1997. So
Okay. All right. So we're moving on 25
25 years.
26 years. 26 years.
Yes.
And sustainability and your ethos has really been part of, even before you were officially an architect, you really had that wired, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of, just given that history and what you've really created and helped enhance, what do you see as the future of sustainability in architecture?
You know, I think the futures of sustainability is really architects, engineers, product manufacturers, developers, the building codes, all understanding that they all impact the sustainability of a building and the sustainability of our built environment. And in fact, even questioning whether there needs to be a building or not is part of that. So I think it's the future of sustainability. Hopefully, will not be a one-liner in a sense, but more of an opportunity for people to understand that the building environment is so impacted by so many people in so many different areas of our economy that unless we're all understanding and working together, and the building codes and systems are evolve into a better sort of rules of the road, that's where the true progress will be made. And I think the AIA 2030 initiative or commitment is certainly a huge step in that direction, getting all the architects, all the firms, at least rowing in the same direction.
So there's a lot of convergence, it sounds like.
Correct.
And the future of sustainability seems strong.
Correct.
As we think about the future, I can't help but think about what we've just gone through and what you must be encountering in terms of the impact of the pandemic and how people think differently about space and place, about architecture. And for example, a basic one would be in our homes today, what used to work as an office where a couple or different people could use an office, today that doesn't work anymore. Just pragmatically, if people want to work remotely, which we're increasingly seeing, you have to have different office space. And so people, I hear these different arrangements that are being made in residential areas. Are you seeing in general any large themes as we have frankly a different society, different needs, whether it's residential or commercial in the architectural world because of the pandemic, that might continue into your buildings and future projects?
It's a huge impact, but we've sort of been designing that way for a long time. And a lot of our multifamily residential buildings incorporated unique amenity spaces and things like that, even pre-pandemic.
So more flexible types of arrangements where you could
Correct.
have it this way for families at this age, and then in 10 years when the family composition may be different, that it can be repurposed or arranged?
I think in the apartment to single family homes to condo, or all of that entire sort of spectrum of places to live as people's lives change, certainly has been impacted by the pandemic. But I think people are still looking for, places, especially when it comes to work. They're still looking for environments. Office employees for sure are looking for environments that provide for a little more connection to their to other colleagues. And so, again, we've sort of been doing that pre-pandemic, but that's really accelerated when the pandemic hit. You needed to bring people back, but you needed to give them a reason to come back other than sitting in a cubicle all day, which we wouldn't have ever advocated for anyways. But the ability to create more collaborative spaces within office environments, and all the way to collaborative spaces within an apartment building or a condo building, for example, has sort of allowed a different shift in how we live, work, and play.
Neat. Okay, back to your questions. Here we go. So your firm, Rinka, has a remarkable reputation, and you yourself have had a prominent career. What was the moment that you felt like your success? Was there a certain project or a certain milestone that you achieved that really like, I've made it, I'm here?
That's a great question, and to be honest, I've always viewed success maybe a little bit differently. I sort of viewed the path to success as sort of a lifelong marathon, and it was a marathon that I sort of see myself hiking along the ridgeline of a mountain range. And I was like, I don't know, I sort of thought about this because I saw the question, but hiking along the ridgeline of a mountain range where you're sort of going in these ups and downs and the peaks and valleys. And so I guess to say it a different way, it's the journey. I've enjoyed the journey. The journey has been, to me, sort of the successful experience in my life. And obviously, when you view your career and that journey along the top of a mountain range, it's great because you can, hey, we're doing this project, and look at this amazing view. Look at this great experience we're having. But then there's another, maybe a little taller summit, and so there hasn't been one sort of key moment when I've said, oh, this is success. I've just enjoyed the journey. I've enjoyed the people and the experiences, and really the amazing projects that I've had the privilege of working on. I will say there's one moment that I do take a huge pride in, and it occurred in 2010 in the depths of the recession, and we had just broken ground, or we had broken ground on the Mone, the 30-story tower next to Tier District. And the developer and I were walking through the site, and you got to remember, I think we were the only tower crane in the entire state. So maybe even in the entire Midwest. Nothing was happening. And so we were going through doing our bi-weekly site walkthrough, and this young gentleman was sweeping up the floors, and he saw us, and he came over and said, "Hey, are you guys the guys responsible for making this happen?" And we said, "Yeah, we're really proud of the hard work that we did and the team did." And he said, "Guys, I just want to thank you. This job allowed me to stay in my house."
Wow.
And so he had this huge smile on his face, and that one project provided over 2,000 jobs, and it was great because it allowed me to see just how much of an impact even one of our projects has on so many people, so many businesses, so many families, not just when it's completed, but during construction. So
that's so powerful, meaningful home ownership. The stability that's brought to neighborhoods and communities through your projects. That's really an inspiring story. So a related question on this front, I would argue that the mountain range that you're going up and down, the peaks and valleys, is probably in the Himalayas. It's certainly among the tallest peaks in the world. Is there a K2 or an Everest out there for you, something that you see as, boy, is there the future goal, or whether it's growth or major project, anything like that out there? Or is it just kind of like, man, things are going well, we just want to keep that going?
I'll answer it a couple different ways, because I don't necessarily have one project, although we did design a 50-story building on the site just south of the Couture, which would be amazing to see happen.
Yes.
But as sort of an urbanist, I would love to see us continue to create more accessible and more exciting destinations along our lakefront. I mean, our lakefront is really a non-recreatable experience, and the ability to create more access. we designed a small park across from the Couture site called Lakefront Gateway Plaza. That's something I hope happens because it's a real key connection. It's sort of the crossroads for all of that activity in that part of the lakefront where you've got the Art Museum, Discovery World, Summerfest grounds, as well as the Couture, and the ability for the Couture to really be the hub. In that bridge going over Lincoln Memorial needs that landing spot, but it can't just be a landing spot. It really is the front door. It's the absolute front door for the city. And so, I think it's not necessarily a project, but I want those experiences to be, followed through.
Yeah.
So that's where I would say, if I could see the design of the downtown and its association with the lakefront, that's certainly a huge key aspect of it.
Well, that's visionary, again, futuristic, and very practical, and really continues Milwaukee on that upward trajectory that frankly has brought a lot of visitors here. And listeners, if you don't know, Milwaukee is going through an amazing renaissance right now, where we've landed a couple of years ago the DNC, in 2024 the RNC. We have, I think, Viking cruise ships is having, I think the number is more than 24 ports of call here in
Correct.
Milwaukee. We've had just no shortage of conventions, and we're on the map in a much bigger way. And Matt, a lot of your work, and just as your vision has inspired and shown, is really a big part of that. So it's pretty amazing. We're incredibly proud of you.
Well, thank you so much
for that, you and your team. And you're, by the way, about half these questions are yours, and then I'm throwing some in. And Matt is equally adept at those you've seen before, and some that I'm throwing kind of curves at you. Hope that's okay.
Throw it at me. Okay,
all right. So for our audience members who aren't as familiar with this concept of design and build, the process, can you explain a little about what it takes to get from an idea stage to ultimately the functional building, and what's the architect's role in all of that?
Sure. I mean, that's we could talk all night about that.
We have all night. You have all night, right? You're here for us.
Sit back, have a drink. I think maybe I view the architect's role a little bit differently than maybe some, and part of that is I think a lot of clients come to us with an idea, and what we like to try to do, and it's because our team in the office is so damn passionate.
Go
about,
Panthers!
Go
yeah, Panthers!
They're so damn passionate about sort of squeezing the best out of every single site project, but we like to sort of elevate the vision for projects, and I would say more times than not, an idea will turn into something much larger. So a client may have an idea of, I'm thinking about an office building, or I'm thinking about that. And our job is to help them visualize and see what the possibilities are. And that's what, that's the job of the master builder, right? The visionary. And so every project starts with that idea and the vision, and then obviously the craft of what we do, taking those ideas and creating something that can actually get built, and that can actually function and be there far beyond our own lives, is, that's equally sort of exciting, and seeing it and get built with our contracting partners, doing the drawings that allow them to understand what they need to do. That's equally as exciting for us. And so that entire sort of process of vision to design and documentation to actual construction and completion that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about that journey. That's an exciting, that to me feels way more like success than maybe just the end product. So And along the way, you're having, not only great experiences with your teammates, but the community who gets excited about seeing that this happen, the developer, hopefully all the neighbors. I mean, it's a fun process, and it's that process that I enjoy the most.
So you've answered a question, I think, along the way that I was going to also ask, is that it's not a solo process. It's not an individual. No. It really is a team.
Correct.
For any particular project.
Yeah.
And then ultimately the residents of that building and the communities are so much more enriched. As you're talking, I can't help but think about individuals on our call. I suspect John Kissinger and Grafe, probably a pretty important partner in terms of some of the types of projects. But I also think about some of the influences, some of the faculty who are watching, and our long-serving Dean Emeritus, Bob Greenstreet, in terms of some of the pride he must have hearing about your experiences.
He was very influential, absolutely. Not just to my growth, but I think to a lot of the architects watching.
Yeah, and we've got others, from Moselle to so many faculty who we owe a great debt of gratitude because of their work that helps you in terms of your team and the continuation. But you give back, and it's that virtuous cycle. That you're building the community, building the talent pipeline, and really enriching all of us.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So as we go on, as we think about our community, and we've touched on it indirectly, but I'd like to hit it really head on. And it deals with the architect's role in creating a vibrant and healthy community. And maybe a little more specificity around that would be the concept, and you talked a little bit about this when you talked about the landing, the usable public spaces in your major development projects or other aspects of community health.
Yeah, the relationship of a building to the community is something that I think is extremely important to us. And one of the reasons why we're not just designing buildings, we're designing communities, we're designing the experiences that we want community members to have. I think I understand the question, but public space and its ability to bring people together, to allow in the community to have those healthy experiences, to allow the community to sort of express itself. Those are the places that occurs. And I'll give you, the Deer District project was extremely important, and I'm very grateful for the Bucks ownership, because they took the exact right perspective and attitude towards how that project should be designed. In their words, it has to be the living room for the city, and not just the downtown, for the entire city. And people needed, in their words again, need to feel like they're welcome there.
Nice. No
matter what race, what religion, what age you are, this needed to be the living room for the entire city. And that's how we approached it.
Yeah.
And it was really about, I would say, the negative space, the plaza space, and sort of the spaces that reach out to Old World 3rd Street. And but that's one example, and it's a great example, and maybe another very amazing moment where it was sort of gratifying for a lot of people in our office was when the Bucks won the national the title, World Championships, and we had something like 85,000 people crammed into a plaza that was, I think we had designed for 20,000. So, but the overhead views of the plaza space and all of those people coming together and celebrating and hugging each other and all of that it was really cool. So, but we try to incorporate that attitude into every single project that we do, whether it's a small residential project all the way up to large scale developments like that. So
one of the things that I'm hearing in your answer is this concept of social equity in an important way. And I think about Olmsted, this incredible designer in Milwaukee even, not just Central Park in New York, but our Riverside and Lake Park and the Newberry Boulevard that connected them, and many other major projects that really wanted that access for everyone, not just for the elite, wealthy, but it sounds like there's a lot of that woven into how you approach architecture and that of your team.
Yeah, you know, Olmsted had such a massive impact on our connection to nature in Milwaukee that a lot of people don't understand that he really was the visionary behind that. So it is important, however small of a project, that everything has some connection to the community, and I think that's something that we always cherish, those opportunities to do a Deer District project, but sometimes it's just, okay, how does the facade or the ground level promote safer pedestrian experiences? When it comes to equity in architecture, I mean, no doubt everybody deserves safety, a great place to live, a great place to work, a great place to play. And so our job as architects is to make sure that our designs are making that positive impact, even in the smallest ways.
Yeah.
And that's, sometimes it doesn't always happen, and it's unfortunate, but that's something that I know that our team always strives for.
Great, terrific. So we've talked a lot about, this is one of the next questions that you had asked, but we've anticipated that in terms of the balance between equity, architectural aesthetics, and we do have, and I'll wrap it up because there's a couple related questions, and I think we've touched upon part of this, but let's put a little sharper point on that. Milwaukee is one of the most highly segregated cities in the country, and I am curious, beyond what you've talked about, in terms of the role that architecture plays in advancing our attempts to address racial equity and diversity and inclusion in our city.
Architecture is really important in serving the future view of who we want to become, and so I think that's really important for designers and architects, and certainly property owners, to understand that our responsibility as good designers and good architects is to design projects with the idea that we're trying to create experiences and places for sort of the highest ideals of equity and inclusion in our communities. So, and I'm a firm believer of that, and I hope most architects are. But architecture itself, there's so many different ways that it can promote communities coming together and sort of promote the best version of our community that we want our communities to grow into. But it's also, we're not designing boxes.
Right.
And I hope, there maybe are some architects who view themselves as designing these boxes or sculptures. And I guess I don't see architecture in that way. I see architecture, it's there to serve the community. It's there to serve the best version of who we want to become. And that's really important to me. And we get such sort of delight and happiness out of improving something that maybe wasn't working before, and seeing our projects really making a positive impact. And that's certainly something that drives me.
Neat, that's great, thank you. So if you could plan anything else about Milwaukee's future, and we talked a little bit about this, and it may be that Mark, I've hit that, but in terms of dream buildings, the future of Milwaukee, the skyline, and anything that you think would be further advancing and bringing greatness to our city.
I think I would always push Milwaukee to continue to think bigger, and I think the ability for everything from more mass transit opportunities to help people who don't maybe have the means to move around as easily as others, to be able to have that means, to great green parks and not just downtown, but in all the neighborhoods. I think as an architect who wants to create that better world that I had mentioned, that's something that I will continue to push for in all the communities that we work in, but certainly in my hometown. So I think it's a lot of people doing a lot of good things and a lot of little things, not just the big things, but a lot of little things that will help make that more and more of a reality.
So I'm going to jump out of the given questions and just talk a little bit and ask you a question, because you work in different cities. You've talked about Fort Lauderdale, talk about things happening in Tempe, and I know you're working in Minneapolis, other, Chicago, other major Midwestern cities. So you give, you produce, you create, and you help them. But also, I imagine at the same time, you learn and you work with a lot of civic leaders. You work with elected officials. You work with other individuals in your sphere of influence. What might that, in terms of points of influence, how do you see shaping Milwaukee's future in that way, in terms of some of the levers and whether it's elected officials or other major business leaders or the contractors with whom you work? Is that ever part of the discussion in terms of this future thinking about Milwaukee's greatness aesthetically, architecturally, that then contributes in so many other ways? Is that, I'm really talking at a policy and not just, okay, we've got an idea, contract, project, but really at a more macro strategic level? Is that part of your work as well, Matt?
Yeah, I think when it comes to connecting ideas to the built environment, absolutely, it's the role of architects and designers to allow others in the community to understand that things can be better. Things could be designed, utilized better for the community. And I think, I do think that whether you're a politician or others who are in different aspects of leadership, sometimes you're just plugging a lot of holes, and you need people to step back and say, okay, where's the vision? What are
Master plan.
Where are we going?
Yeah.
And how are we going to get there? Because if you're just plugging those holes, I'm telling you, you're probably not going to get the best results overall.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So it's great to see that and understand it's not just specific to a project, but it really is the larger planning and ecosystem, if you will, of how cities are built and going forward. So UWM School of Architecture and Urban Planning. So I think we've talked about the importance, internships, externships. Tell me a little bit more. I want to dive into this issue of scholarships for a moment. Tell me about your thinking and why that's important to Rinka.
Well, our roots for a lot of us in our office are certainly at UWM, and what did I say, 75-80% I think is what I calculated. But I think the importance of UWM and the critical nature of its ability to shape the minds of future leaders, for us, that's huge. That's how healthy communities and cities continue to flourish, and for us, being a part of that and whatever we can do to continue to help institutions like UWM, who have consistently, delivered great minds to our communities, I think is something that it's an easy one for us to support.
Our work and vision, values, I think, are so aligned with what you're doing, how you've grown Rinka, and how UWM has continued to exist, succeed, and grow over the years. Our students come from largely Wisconsin. They stay here. you're an example. They contribute, they give back, and it really is single-handedly from a talent provision, from whether it's the artistic and cultural ethos, or it's the business and engineering, and it's all of those things together, but it really contributes, and you're such a big part of that in terms of your firm now, the size and scale, and really contributing in so many different ways. So you spent some time at UWM. Any favorite memories, any experiences there that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think the fondest memories that I have at UWM and School of Architecture in particular are sort of those late night, all night pushes right before a project was due, and while I maybe didn't enjoy them at the time, I look back at those days because it really did shape my, not just my work ethic, but how I view sometimes the process of doing what we do. And at the same time, you just had some fun. You met lifelong friends, and that experience of being in the studio and in that studio environment, and each person sort of toiling away on their project work. I cherish those moments. That's part of the journey. I think when you're in that, right, when you're sort of in the forest of doing that, maybe it's not quite as alluring. But when you think about what you're gaining from that, it's invaluable. That's
cool. Our audience may not know that we have the only architecture program in the state of Wisconsin.
That's correct.
And it's also one of the top-ranked architecture programs in the country. But the thing that I've found intriguing, I grew up in the business school, that was my background, and as chancellor, what I've come to realize as I look across the different programs that we have, where there's an amazing amount of rigor and challenge, and where we have what I consider to be many of our crown jewels. And of course, I'm always going to say we've got many in the business school, which we do. I'm very proud of our Lubart College of Business. But what I've really appreciated about, and I can give many examples, whether there are specific fields in engineering or a College of Nursing, some of the disciplines, but in architecture, the discipline and the weeding out every year, the level of rigor is remarkable, and how many people want to be architects but frankly can't. It's remarkably challenging. It's interdisciplinary, the art, the design, but also understanding weight loads and equations and mathematics. I mean, there's a lot that has to come together, and we want that rigor. It's kind of like I say, we don't want nurses that are in classes with 300 people, because you want the small attention to detail. Same thing with architecture. You don't want our buildings, and I think about a 42-story building or a 50-story building, not well architected, if I may turn that into a verb there, but really not designed, not certainly built well. So I appreciate the rigor and what that means, and really how our program continues to contribute not just to Rinka, but to, frankly, architecture around the world in many ways.
Yeah, it's essential, and I think we would all say the world would be a better place if the environment was equally as good. So
exactly. So Matt, I'm going to broaden it now a little bit. Before I do that, though, and offer a few closing comments, anything that we haven't covered, anything that you think would be of interest that I haven't touched on, or anything else about what's going on in the world of architecture, or any other major points that I've missed?
I mean, we could talk all night. Certainly, no. I think this has been a great sort of conversation, touching on a lot of subjects. So, nothing that I would say we've missed.
Great. Well, I have thrown a number of questions at you that weren't part of the script, and I really appreciate how well you've just gone with the flow. Thank you for accommodating me.
Absolutely.
In terms of some of my questions that have gone left, right, and moved around. I think this has been a wonderful education for a lot of individuals who don't really know the background, the ideas turning into actual projects that are so not only beautiful in terms of so many of your projects, and I encourage people to look at your website. It's just Rinka.
Yep, Rinka.com.
Rinka.com. Take a look at many of the projects, many of those being planned as well, and it's functional, it's aesthetic, and really is changing what individuals do in the spaces and places that you've created. It's pretty neat to have that opportunity to share, and you're really somebody who we're so proud of, and just truly one of Milwaukee's stars, and I think that when we look in the future back at what you've done, you really have that Olmsted-like aura, and your vision and the spaces that you've created will long outlive all of us in a wonderful way. So thank you, audience, for joining us. Special night here in Milwaukee to have Matt Rinka and his background, his experiences, and sharing your views on a lot of things that are happening. I hope you stay tuned for our next event, Chancellor Presents. We're working on a number of great possibilities. We'll be following up with you shortly. And thank you for all that you do to support UWM and our community. And like I say, stay tuned for the future. Be careful out there. If you're in Milwaukee tomorrow, it's going to be quite the snowy day from everything we're hearing. So with that, we'll call it good night. Thank you once again, Matt.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.